You'll have to forgive me, Charles. I didn't have time to animate these two idiots, but they were pretty animated last night at the State of the Union address. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Jason. Thanks for asking. Back from Phuket in Thailand, where I was, and in the residential library that doesn't
Excellent.
reside in an Easter Island head lookalike. So I want to begin by this is actually directly related to the image. In 1976, I was in, I forget what month it was, but it was in the fall semester in England. I signed up for a tour, for a class on Charles Dickens. And at the time, and one of the features of it was that we would be going around London to the sites that Dickens had written about, including visiting the old curiosity shop. And I think we did that on the first class. And I didn't know that my great-grandparents had bought this book 95 years ago in the old curiosity shop, which is, Dickens wrote obviously before 1931, but it was a first edition of a redone collection of Dickens tales that is inscribed, I won't try to open it up now, but it's inscribed as a gift from my great-grandparents to my father, who in 1931 was 5 years old. So, I was pretty charged up about this class. I loved Dickens. I started reading Dickens, I think, in the summer before the seventh grade for Horace Mann. And I think by the time I got into college, I'd read pretty much all of Dickens. And we go into the classroom, and the teacher turns to me and says, "All right, Charles, you can begin reading on page 27. And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "It's a junior level class in college." She said, "Yeah, you could begin reading out loud this tale." I said, "Why would I do that?" She said, "Well, there are people in the class who don't really understand English very well." I got up out of the class. I went directly to the president of the university, and I said, "What the fuck is going on with this book?"
That sounds like English.
I'm not going to sit in a class on Dickens to read to my fellow students who don't understand English. Why are these students in the classroom?
Yeah.
And that's my reaction here to these morons. I mean, you don't get to walk into an institution that was created in 1789 and has, in terms of the United States, an official 250-year history being marked this year, and behave like a Somali pirate and a fake Palestinian, keffiyeh wearing idiot in our chamber. You just don't get to do that. And I think this sort of behavior, and the not so mean Al Green or whatever that guy's name is, getting kicked out again and then likening himself to Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. Enough with this bullshit. Okay, we have serious work to do in this country. Even Fareed Zakaria, the CNN plagiarist, is now ranting and raving, and I agree with him on this, that the blue cities and states are out of fiscal control. We have a massive problem financial problem in our country, and these morons are preening on TV to get more morons to send them money to their fake charities and their fake business operations. They belong, in the case of Ilhan Omar, if it is true that she married her brother to come to this country, she needs to be sent on a Somali pirate boat back to Somalia forthwith. And her family should be forced to disgorge any ill-gotten gains. If her husband is an American, he needs to go to prison. And as far as Rashida Tlaib, her conduct is so far over, over the top, and unfortunately, it resonates with the uneducated youths across the public school landscape and private school landscape in our country, who have been encouraged by these radicals posing as teachers, that it's okay. I mean, I witnessed it firsthand. I went to a meeting, I've talked to you about this before, where the dean of Yale Law School through a fancy lunch to the bigger donors at Yale, was bragging that she let her entire Yale Law School student body out of class to work pro bono to fight Trump. And she was proud of that and thought that people in the audience would say, yeah, that's a reason to give you more money. It's ridiculous. And so we have this kind of behavior is I hope Johnson does something about it. Nancy Pelosi ran the House with an iron fist when she wasn't busy insider trading, which was most of the time. But, and Johnson needs to do the same thing here. This is outrageous behavior. And it's not one president versus 435 congresspeople. That's not the balance of power. It's not one president versus thousands of activist judges. It's three co-equal branches of government with the president having constitutionally granted broad executive power to run this country. And I think Trump needs to step it up. I was very impressed that Fetterman finally showed up in a pretty nice looking suit. He's beginning to see this. And I think the grandstanding, the Trump derangement syndrome behavior, okay, that was funny for maybe the first 6 months, or interesting. But when you do that now, with Trump having enormous popular support, now in his 6th year as president, some would say his 10th, counting the 4 years where the presidency was stolen from him. But, this is somebody with enduring support. Some of the gestures and some of the comments in the State of the Union were magnificent, I thought. And when people behave like this, you're not just insulting Trump, you're insulting an overwhelming majority of the country at a time when that overwhelming majority wants to get serious about fixing things. And you want to go grandstand to get more money to steal from suckers. That's what you want. Not you, Jason, but these morons in the Muppet Show, the evil Muppets. It's really time for some Democrats to stand up and take these people to task. If you're selling arsenic and dog shit in a smoothie here with doing this kind of stuff. This does not appeal to voters. Nobody wants the United States to turn into Minneapolis. And I don't even know, where is Rashida Tlaib from? I think Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Does she represent the Dearborn section of Michigan, or
Probably,
what does she represent?
Yeah, we got to look into that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, Charles, really. I don't know. I couldn't remember if that was sort of like, they have that thing, I don't know if it's Canada or England, where they're yelling at each other, and that's like how they do it. This is not normally how they do it, though, right? Like sitting there yelling in the middle of the president's speech. It's not a wrestling match. I mean, why didn't they eject her?
Well, and contrast it, a couple of things to contrast with. One, when Obama gave one of his State of the Union speeches, a congressman stood up and said, "You lie." And that was the focus. I mean, the whole cover, that's outrageous for the congressman. I think it might have been a white man to make that kind of statement. It was, Obama made a statement, I believe, about the McCain-Feingold bill when the Supreme Court tossed it. Saying it's unfortunate, bad Supreme Court decision because it does things that it didn't do, according to Obama. And this guy says, "You lie," and the press was all over the guy. For weeks on end, it's outrageous. How could you do this? Blah, blah. Here's the inverse, and Joe Schmo Scarborough, note to Schmo, please tell us about that intern, exactly what happened. But he's saying that Trump said some shit that's just outrageous in the State of the Union. Joe, maybe your mother cares about it if she's still alive, what you have to say, and maybe Mika does. But most sane individuals do not give a shit what you have to say. And so you contrast that. Then, during the 4 years where Otto Penn pretended to be the president and gave extremely insulting and angry State of the Union speeches, where was the criticism of that? Right? People just stood up on the left. People endorsed. Remember I think one of his early speeches, he said, this Christmas is going to be Christmas season is going to be a season of death and destruction for the MAGA crowd. And remember all those speeches of Biden behind the Hitler red background, where he was shouting at the top of his lungs, insane bromides.
He was like Muppet Hitler. We should have made a
Yeah.
Muppet Hitler violent.
You could still do that. You could still do that.
But Charles, the New York Times called that a rare breach of protocol when Joe Wilson simply shouted, "You lie," one brief thing.
Right.
Ilhan Omar was screaming over Trump like throughout the thing, and nobody said anything. It's just an incredible degradation of, because also the other thing is it just encourages people, like we had that snowball fight with the cops in the park, and Mandami says, oh, it's just a snowball fight. Okay, on the one hand you could say that, but at the same time when I watched that, I saw a gang, like a little kid testing, there's 2 cops and there's 12 kids throwing snowballs. It's like, hey, if they don't do anything about the snowballs, let's surround them. If they don't do anything about us surrounding them, somebody get their gun. Those cops are thinking this we do one wrong thing and this crowd becomes an angry mob and we could be killed.
Well, again, I left that park. That was the park I played in as a young kid, Washington Square Park. An oasis of tranquility and a great set of memories of my youth. Because even during the 70s, it was sort of interesting to be there. And you largely felt safe. I stopped feeling safe in New York City quite a while ago, and that's why I left. And maybe, people in New York are happy that I left. But when enough people like me leave the city and it becomes swarmed with gangs, it's not going to end well for New York City, for the tax base, and for the other residents who maybe can't leave. And this 34-year-old knucklehead, I think he needs to be investigated as well. Senator Kennedy has been saying some things about, raising questions about how he obtained his citizenship. And, there really was never a true vetting of him. But what we're seeing now, he wants to spend $70 million, is what I just read, on a feasibility study, not concerning whether to do this, but where to site city-run grocery stores throughout free, that will give, I guess, free groceries or cheap groceries in the city. He wants to spend $70 million on that study. $70 million is a shit ton of money. And for some 34-year-old moron to have the discretion, just give it
to people to buy groceries with,
and while at the same time saying, that what we need to do is raise taxes. We have a fiscal crisis because I need to spend $70 million. Why don't you spend $7 billion on it? I mean, it's just, it's insanity, this guy.
And the taxes are already very high. Moron. 10% raise to property tax, it is going to make people want to move, because it's like you're already, when New York was good and the property tax was high, it was like, now it's getting worse. The cost is going up. I mean, this is, obviously, I don't know anything about economics, but that's pretty simple economics. When something gets worse and costs more, you don't want it anymore.
Well, again, the whole Franklin Roosevelt ruse about the New Deal and all that stuff, that occurred at a time when private sector labor was more expensive than public sector labor. So if you can, rather than hiring a contractor to build, a private contractor to do something, if you can get public sector employees paid less, labor rates less to do the same job as the private, well, maybe that would make sense. But now, public sector employees are vastly overpaid before you get into the issue of whether they're doing any real work that people find useful. I mean, the number of public sector employees in New York City who make more than $200,000, $300,000 is astounding to me. Absolutely astounding. And it's a circular argument. New York is an expensive place, so we need to spend, our public sector workers need to live in the city. So, we can't lower their pay. Of course we have to increase their pay. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Before 1 cent of tax revenue, tax rates are increased, the public sector, the staff, you should start with Zoran Mandami's staff, should be cut in half. Whatever it is now, at least in half, maybe 80%. Do that first. Stop having people hire consultants to do stupid feasibility studies. And if you're done doing all that, once you cut all these excess people out, all these deputy mayors and their staffs and their junkets, Do all that. Let's look at the budget again, see if we really need to raise taxes. And make every department follow the example of the mayor. I assure you that if I were called back in to look at the budget of New York City, I could figure out how to cut it in half. If I were given access to the actual numbers,
probably in an afternoon.
Well, it would probably the numbers I'm sure are big. It's $127 billion of spending. So, of course, you're going to be told, well, you can't cut this. Of the 127, we have discretionary spending over $2 billion. Fuck that.
Well, it's like Elon Musk, right? He fired 80% of the people, and Twitter ran better.
Exactly. I think you're going to find there are a lot of ghost workers, i.e. people who are being paid, but don't actually do anything. I think you also would find, if you could do the work, that there are a lot of ghost pensioners, people cashing pension checks who are 160 years old, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just, and I ran the Dillon Reed Merchant Department when I was 32 actually. So there are plenty of people around who can take on jobs bigger than that in their 30s. Zoran Mamdummy is not one of them, nor is AOC, who apparently did some podcast late at night after she made a fool of herself, proved to the world at the Munich Security Conference and other venues in Europe that she was a complete moron. Whereas John Kennedy said she's a bit like she's like Kamala Harris with more bartending experience. It's not impressive. No. And Fetterman is right to say, the Democrats have to stand for something. You can't just be the party of criticism. What do you stand for? Are you arguing, as Mamdummy is and AOC is, that people with no experience in the private sector need to be given power and discretion to raise taxes as high as they want, to spend money on whatever fanciful projects they want, junkets flying private around the world? They need to go to conferences, have fancy parties where they wear stupid dresses, as AOC did, and then don't account properly for the cost of that dress. Is that what we want? A bunch of people who, the districts, the voting districts in the House have been gerrymandered to the extent that it's very tough for somebody like that lady who ran against AOC, Tina Forte. Maybe she wasn't a great candidate, but it's difficult to actually oust these lunatics, Ilhan, Omar, and AOC and others in their gerrymandered districts. And for some strange reason, AOC's district, I believe, now doesn't have an open air slave market yet, but it has an open air, late night prostitution bistro and drugs everywhere and filth everywhere. And remember, she's the one who made it impossible for Amazon to have a warehouse in New York City.
Well, they got to make room for all the hookers, I guess.
And nobody, and timid people, who, let's say single parents who may have custody of 2 or more children, they're struggling to organize, how do we get the children to school and back? How do we make sure they aren't abducted on the street? How do we feed them if they get sick? How do we pay for all? They don't need more prostitutes and more drug dealers, more filth, and then have this junketeer go over to Munich. I mean, what the fuck was she doing in Munich? I have a maid in the apartment right now. It's a very nice lady, but she can't really speak English. She has a better grasp of American foreign policy than AOC or Ilhan Omar do. That's before we get to their ridiculous domestic ideas. So the people who are being paid by the Democratic Party, the consultants, the advisors, they want to keep their invitations to the high donor class parties and junkets around the world. They want to keep those going. And they're evidently not smart enough to read the tea leaves. I mean, James Carville had his moment of fame when he backed Bill Clinton in 1992 early, and he predicted Bill would win, and Bill did. And then, that's his claim to fame. Other than that, if he isn't a lizard person, he sure looks like one. And, he's a nasty piece of shit, basically. And he's one of their prime, he's leading the charge along with others. I believe is he a senator or a governor now? Murphy in New Jersey.
He's the governor, isn't he?
Yeah, he's now joined the bandwagon with other people who are saying that, when Democrats take control, all Trump backers are going to be severely punished, including possibly jailed. You want to run on that platform? You're going to hear the sound of guns being cocked across the country, and people who didn't go to the polls, because they were pretty sure that a Republican was going to win or Trump was going to win. Those people who should have voted and didn't vote are going to be at the polls very early, making sure there's no monkey business at the polls, and they are going to drag brothers and sisters, and if they have children who could vote, and grandparents and aunts and all, they are going to be dragged to the polls in record numbers to ensure that kind of vigilante justice doesn't happen under presumably, a crooked Gavin Newsom or a crooked, you name the more. And on the subject of Gavin Newsom, to go in front of a black audience and say, I'm like you, I have shitty SATs. And what was the other thing he said? It was so stupid. I mean,
he can't read.
He can't read. I'm just like you. I've got shitty SATs and I can't. So that's what you think all black people are like, shitty SATs and you can't read. I mean, why might that be? Might it be because the public school system sucks across the country, and because public school unions are crooked as hell, and because woke bullshit doesn't help you at all cope with life? Could that be why, Mr. Woke Governor, Mr. Moron? By all means, pitch the idea that he could be president of the United States. He fucked up San Francisco as mayor. He fucked up California as governor. Now let him fuck up America. That's the idea?
He's just like, hey, I'm a 960 SAT guy, just like you. And they're like, who are you talking to?
Failure to read it. The guy, he was from a rich background, and I think he also said, I grew up eating Wonder Bread. Not worrying about how I would, get through the day, so I ate Wonder Bread.
Come on.
Now, I happen to like Wonder Bread as a kid, but don't eat much bread now. But anyway, how does this guy, how did he get elected as mayor and governor, and how can he be in contention in the Democratic Party in any poll to be president?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. You see these leaders of foreign countries, they speak multiple languages. They like somebody like Sergei Lavrov, whether you like Russia or him or not, that is obviously an individual who has had quite a bit of education, experience, foreign language, etc. He's a highly intelligent guy. Gavin Newsom is a rube. He's an absolute idiot.
Yeah, I mean, he's back on the I can't read program,
You give him a coloring book, like
Exactly.
Governor Newsom. He's like sit there in his office, scratch and sniff.
Yeah, I don't know if they did this in your years in elementary school, but in my early years in elementary school, if you acted up in class, I don't think they put a dunce cap on you, but they made you go and sit in a chair in the corner.
The corner existed when I was very young. People are pointing out that Murphy, for about a month, he left office in January 2026. He's not the governor of New Jersey anymore.
Okay.
Now it's Mickey Sherrill.
Oh, okay, yeah, but the former governor. The former governor. I mean, these and thanks for that correction. But that kind of the idea that you're going to criminalize voting, right? If you decide, it used to be you had a secret ballot box, right? That truly you flip the lever, not some Chinese spook operating through the Smartmatic machine, or directed by Soros. you as a physical thing, you could see your ballot be counted, and the results were known that day. That used to be the system.
So, Charles, we're just about out of time here. We're going to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum. I hope people will join us. There's still quite a lot to talk about. Hillary's testimony coming up. We'll be back in less than 5 minutes on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks to everybody who sponsors the show. You can also follow me on X at JG_CSTT and sponsor there. We'll be right back, everybody.